In a stunning conclusion to one of the most high-profile criminal cases in entertainment history, Sean "Diddy" Combs, the five-year-old rap icon and music industry titan, has been sentenced to 50 months in federal prison following his conviction on trafficking charges. The sentencing, handed down by U.S. District Judge Arun Subramanian, marks a dramatic fall from grace for one of hip-hop's most successful entrepreneurs and closes a painful chapter for the survivors who courageously testified against him. The verdict and sentencing. On the 4th of October 2025, Judge Subramanian delivered a sentence that fell between the extremes sought by both prosecution and defense. Combs received 50 months, approximately 4 years and 2 months in federal prison, along with a $500,000 fine and 5 years of supervised release following his incarceration. The sentence came after a jury found him guilty on 4 of 5 counts, including human trafficking and transportation for purposes of commercial exploitation. Prosecutors had pushed aggressively for a sentence exceeding 11 years, arguing that the severity of Combs' crimes and the trauma inflicted on his victims warranted substantial punishment. In stark contrast, his defense team requested just 14 months, which would have essentially equaled time served, given that Combs had been in custody since his arrest in September 2024. The judge's decision to impose 50 months represented a middle ground, though one that still ensures the disgraced mogul will spend several more years behind bars. An important aspect of the sentencing is that Combs will receive credit for the time he has already served while awaiting trial, more than a year in detention. This means his remaining sentence will be reduced accordingly, though he still faces considerable time in federal custody before he can hope for release. The charges. A mixed verdict. The jury's deliberations resulted in what legal experts termed a partial verdict, finding Combs guilty on 4 counts while acquitting him on 1. The convictions centered on 2 primary areas: trafficking of individuals and transportation of people across state lines for commercial exploitation purposes. These federal crimes carry severe penalties and reflect a pattern of behavior that prosecutors argued demonstrated Combs' systematic exploitation of vulnerable women. However, in a significant development, the jury acquitted Combs on charges of racketeering and trafficking for purposes of exploitation. These were among the most serious allegations in the indictment, and their dismissal represented a partial victory for the defense, even as the guilty verdicts on other counts ensured substantial prison time. The racketeering charge, in particular, had been central to prosecutors' theory of the case. They had attempted to prove that Combs operated a criminal enterprise through his business empire, using his influence, wealth, and network of associates to facilitate and conceal his alleged crimes. The jury's decision to reject this characterization suggests they found insufficient evidence to support the broader conspiracy allegations, even while concluding that Combs had committed specific acts of trafficking and transportation. The judge's remarks, acknowledging the survivors. During the sentencing hearing, Judge Subramanian delivered powerful remarks that centered not on Combs, but on the women whose testimony had been instrumental in securing his conviction. He specifically praised 2 individuals identified in court documents as Jane Doe and Cassie Ventura as brave survivors who had given voice to others suffering in silence. Jane and Cassie Ventura endured harm and trauma that we cannot imagine, the judge stated from the bench. I can only say that your families are proud of you, and your children will be proud of you for coming to court to tell what really happened. You weren't just speaking to the jury, you were speaking to women who feel powerless. These remarks highlighted the broader significance of the case beyond Combs himself. The judge recognized that the survivors' willingness to testify publicly, despite the personal cost and potential for re-traumatization, served a purpose larger than securing one man's conviction. Their testimony represented a beacon for other victims of exploitation and abuse, particularly those victimized by powerful men in positions of authority. Cassie Ventura, in particular, had played a pivotal role in the case. Her allegations and subsequent cooperation with authorities had helped build the prosecution's case and encouraged other victims to come forward. The judge's specific acknowledgement of her courage underscored her centrality to the proceedings and the impact her testimony had on the jury's deliberations. Judge Subramanian also addressed Combs directly, expressing hope that the rap mogul would make the most of this second chance. This language suggested the judge viewed the sentence not merely as punishment, but as an opportunity for rehabilitation and redemption, a chance for Combs to reflect on his actions, take responsibility, and eventually re-enter society as a changed person. Combs' reaction: minimal emotion in court. According to multiple media accounts from the courtroom, Combs displayed remarkably little emotion as his sentence was announced. He looked toward the judge briefly as the terms were read aloud, then lowered his eyes. The man who had once commanded stages and boardrooms with charisma and confidence appeared diminished in the federal courtroom, dressed in prison attire and flanked by U.S. Marshals. There was one notable reaction. Combs shook his head when Judge Subramanian discussed Cassie Ventura's impact on the case and referenced the effect the proceedings would have on children, presumably Combs' own children, several of whom were present in the courtroom gallery, along with his mother. As he gathered his legal documents and prepared to be escorted from the courtroom, Combs turned toward his family members and delivered a brief, emotional statement. "I love you. I'm very sorry. I'll be okay." These words, spoken to his children and mother, represented perhaps the most human moment in the proceedings, a father and son attempting to reassure his loved ones even as he faced years of separation from them. The contrast was stark. A man who had built an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who had shaped the sound of contemporary music and launched countless careers, was now reduced to offering hurried reassurances before being led away to begin serving his sentence. The background: how the case developed. The criminal charges against Sean Combs did not emerge suddenly. Instead, they were the culmination of years of allegations, whispers in the industry, and increasing public scrutiny of powerful men's behavior toward women, particularly in the wake of the accountability movement that transformed multiple industries. Combs had long been one of hip-hop's most successful figures, having founded Bad Boy Records in 1993 and built it into one of the industry's most influential labels. He had discovered and developed artists including the notorious B.I.G., Faith Evans, and Mace, while simultaneously building his own career as a performer under various monikers including Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, and simply Diddy. Beyond music, he had expanded into fashion, liquor, and media, accumulating wealth estimated in the hundreds of millions. However, alongside this success came persistent allegations of harmful and abusive behavior. Multiple women had made claims over the years, though many had been settled quietly through non-disclosure agreements and financial payments. The system that had protected Combs for decades began to crumble, as more victims found the courage to speak publicly and as law enforcement agencies began taking allegations more seriously. The arrest in September 2024 came after a lengthy investigation by federal authorities. Prosecutors had built their case carefully, gathering testimony from multiple victims, collecting physical evidence, and documenting patterns of behavior that they argued constituted systematic trafficking and exploitation. Since his arrest, Combs had been held without bail, with judges repeatedly denying his requests for release pending trial. The government had argued successfully that he posed a flight risk and a potential danger to witnesses, given his substantial financial resources and international connections. The clemency question, an unprecedented request, in an unusual development that has raised eyebrows across legal and political circles. Combs's attorneys have formally petitioned the administration of President Donald Trump for a pardon or commutation of sentence. According to reports, this request was submitted even before sentencing occurred, suggesting a strategy by the defense to pursue every possible avenue for reducing or eliminating Combs's punishment. The White House has neither confirmed nor denied receiving such a petition, maintaining the administration's typical discretion regarding clemency matters. However, Combs's legal team has insisted that dialogue is already underway, suggesting they have received some indication of receptiveness from administration officials. This clemency request is extraordinary for several reasons. First, presidential pardons are typically considered only after a defendant has served a substantial portion of their sentence and demonstrated rehabilitation. Seeking clemency before even being sentenced represents an aggressive and unconventional legal strategy. Second, the nature of Combs's crimes, trafficking and transportation for commercial exploitation makes clemency politically fraught. These are serious federal offenses involving the exploitation of vulnerable women, and granting clemency could generate significant backlash, particularly from victims' advocates and those concerned with combating human trafficking. Nevertheless, Combs' attorneys appear determined to pursue this avenue, likely calculating that their client's celebrity status, charitable work over the years, and connections in entertainment and business circles might provide some leverage. Whether the Trump administration will seriously consider such a request remains to be seen, but legal experts consider it a long shot at best. Connections to other high-profile cases. The Combs case has intersected with other major criminal investigations in unexpected ways. Most notably, Dwayne "Kef" D. Davis, the primary suspect in the 1996 incident involving legendary rapper Tupac Shakur, has made explosive allegations that could further damage Combs' reputation and potentially expose him to additional legal jeopardy. Davis, who has been charged in connection with Shakur's passing, has claimed that Sean "Diddy" Combs was actually the person who ordered the attack on Shakur and Row Records founder Suge Knight. According to Davis's account, Combs allegedly offered $1 million as payment for the incident, providing the financial incentive for the September 1996 events that claimed Shakur's life and wounded Knight. These allegations, if proven, would represent one of the most significant revelations in hip-hop history, potentially solving a case that has remained officially unsolved for nearly 3 decades. The incident involving Tupac Shakur has been the subject of countless investigations, documentaries, and conspiracy theories, with the East Coast-West Coast rivalry of the mid-1992s often cited as context for the events. However, it's crucial to note that Davis's allegations have not been independently verified, and he has potential motivations for implicating Combs, including possibly seeking to reduce his own legal exposure or settling old scores. No charges have been filed against Combs related to Shakur's case, and his attorneys have vehemently denied any involvement. Nevertheless, these claims have added another layer of controversy to Combs's already damaged reputation and raised questions about whether authorities might investigate further. If evidence emerged supporting Davis's allegations, Combs could potentially face additional charges related to conspiracy, which would carry far more severe penalties than his current convictions. The victims. Courage in the face of power. Central to the Combs case are the women who came forward to testify against him, despite the personal cost and public scrutiny such testimony entailed. These survivors faced a defendant with enormous wealth, powerful legal representation, and a vast network of supporters in the entertainment industry. Speaking out required tremendous courage, particularly given the history of how accusers against powerful men have often been treated in both the legal system and the court of public opinion. Cassie Ventura, born Cassandra Ventura, had been in a long-term relationship with Combs that began when she was signed to his Bad Boy Records as a young artist. Her allegations detailed a pattern of physical mistreatment, coercion, and controlling behavior that she claimed lasted for years. When she initially filed a civil lawsuit in 2023, it sent shockwaves through the industry and appeared to embolden other women to share their own experiences. The woman, identified as Jane Doe in court proceedings, provided testimony that corroborated many of Ventura's claims and added additional allegations of trafficking and exploitation. Her willingness to participate in the criminal trial, despite the option of remaining anonymous in civil proceedings, demonstrated a commitment to seeking justice that went beyond personal compensation. Judge Subramanian's acknowledgement of these women as brave survivors reflected an evolving understanding within the legal system of the challenges facing victims of exploitation, particularly when their abusers occupy positions of power and influence. His statement that they gave voice to others recognized that their testimony served a purpose beyond this single case. It contributed to a broader societal reckoning with abuse and the systems that enable it. Industry implications: a reckoning for hip-hop. The conviction and sentencing of Sean Combs represents more than the downfall of one individual. It signals a potential shift in how the music industry, and particularly hip-hop, addresses allegations of abuse and exploitation. For decades, the culture surrounding rap music has often celebrated hypermasculinity and has sometimes treated allegations against prominent figures with skepticism or defensiveness. Combs was not merely a successful artist but an institution unto himself. Bad Boy Records had shaped the sound of 1992nd and 2000s hip-hop and R&B. And Combs's business acumen had made him a model for artist entrepreneurs across genres. His conviction sends a message that success and influence do not place anyone above the law, regardless of their contributions to music or culture. Other figures in the industry are now facing renewed scrutiny, with victims potentially feeling more empowered to come forward and authorities demonstrating greater willingness to pursue cases against powerful entertainment figures. This shift mirrors broader changes in how society addresses misconduct, from increased accountability movements to greater recognition of the need to protect vulnerable individuals in creative industries. However, challenges remain. The music industry, like many creative fields, has long operated within formal power structures where young artists, particularly women, can be vulnerable to exploitation by those controlling access to success. Record deals, performance opportunities, and career advancement have sometimes been leveraged to coerce favors or tolerate abusive behavior. Changing this culture requires not just prosecuting individual wrongdoers, but reforming the structures and norms that enable exploitation. Legal analysis: significance of the partial verdict. From a legal perspective, the jury's mixed verdict in the Combs case offers interesting insights into how jurors weighed the evidence and charges. The conviction on trafficking and transportation charges indicates the jury found sufficient evidence that Combs had engaged in specific criminal acts, that he had recruited, harbored, or transported individuals for commercial activities through force, fraud, or coercion. However, the acquittal on racketeering charges suggests the jury was not convinced by prosecutors' broader theory that Combs operated a criminal enterprise. Racketeering charges, prosecuted under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations (RICO) Act, require proving a pattern of criminal activity carried out through an ongoing organization. This is a higher bar than proving individual criminal acts, as it requires demonstrating systematic, coordinated illegal behavior. The acquittal on certain trafficking charges, as distinct from the trafficking charge on which he was convicted, likely reflects technical distinctions in the statute that jurors found important. Federal trafficking law contains various provisions with different elements that must be proven, and the jury evidently concluded that while some charges were supported by evidence, others were not. This mixed verdict may actually have served both parties' interests to some degree. For prosecutors, the convictions on 4 counts ensured substantial prison time and validated their decision to bring the case. For the defense, the acquittals on the most serious charges, particularly racketeering, prevented what could have been a much longer sentence and preserved some basis for arguing that their client was not the systematic criminal mastermind portrayed by the government. The road ahead: appeals and aftermath. Sean Combs' legal journey is far from over, despite the sentencing. His attorneys have already indicated their intention to appeal the conviction, arguing that errors during the trial prejudiced their client's ability to receive a fair hearing. Appeals in federal criminal cases can take years to resolve, and while Combs will remain incarcerated during this process, a successful appeal could potentially result in a new trial or even dismissal of some charges. Common grounds for appeal in cases like this include claims that the judge made errors in admitting or excluding evidence, that prosecutorial misconduct occurred, or that jury instructions were improper. Combs's defense team will scrutinize every aspect of the trial record, looking for potential reversible errors. However, federal appellate courts generally give substantial deference to trial court decisions, and the standard for overturning a conviction is high. The defense would need to demonstrate not just that errors occurred, but that those errors materially affected the verdict, that absent the errors, there is a reasonable probability the jury would have reached a different conclusion. Beyond the criminal case, Combs also faces numerous civil lawsuits from alleged victims seeking monetary damages. These cases will proceed on separate tracks from the criminal matter, and the conviction will likely strengthen plaintiffs' positions in those cases, as the jury verdict can be introduced as evidence of wrongdoing. Broader context: trafficking and federal prosecution. The Combs case fits within a broader pattern of increased federal attention to trafficking and exploitation. In recent years, federal authorities have devoted substantial resources to prosecuting traffickers, recognizing that these crimes often involve interstate or international activity that local law enforcement may struggle to address effectively. Trafficking prosecutions have targeted various types of offenders, from those operating explicit commercial enterprises to entertainment industry figures accused of exploiting their positions of power. The common thread is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel commercial activities conduct that federal law treats as serious criminal behavior, warranting severe punishment. Critics have sometimes argued that trafficking prosecutions can be overreaching, particularly in cases involving adults who argue they are making autonomous choices. However, in cases like Combs, where allegations involve coercion, abuse of power dynamics, and exploitation of vulnerable individuals, there is generally broader consensus that federal intervention is appropriate. The substantial sentence imposed on Combs, 50 months in federal prison, reflects the seriousness with which courts treat these offenses. It also serves a deterrent function, sending a message to others in positions of power that exploiting that power for personal gratification or profit will result in severe consequences.